This video describes the sharing function in iLabber, and that's where you can have more than one person working on the same experiment. So for example, I'm doing this chemistry and I've prepared this compound and I'm now sending it to one of my colleagues to run a spectrum or an assay. So I want that person to be able to add some information to my experiment. So I go to Share Experiment, the button here, click on that, and then I can choose to share this experiment. I then need to find my colleague, so I click on the Find Users button. I find my colleague, I double click on them, and they're added. I click OK. And then I can choose whether they're a contributor to the experiment, which means that they can add sections themselves, but they cannot edit my data, or they can be a co-editor where they can edit my sections as well. This time I just want them to be able to add the data, so I choose contributor and click OK. I'll now log out and log in as that person. So I'm now logged in as the other user, and you can see that that experiment is here in my current experiments. I open it in the usual way, and it says it's a shared experiment. But you see here that the toolbox is not active. It's the same as when you always open another person's experiments. You can't edit them, the toolbox isn't active. But if I click on this Start Edit link, then the toolbox becomes active, and now I can edit this experiment. So I can add sections to this experiment. So I've actually saved a section here in my section, so I can just quickly add a section to this experiment. I can move it to the right place, and this is the section which I've added with the spectrum that I've recorded. And you see here that it says that this section was added by this other user. Now it's the first user who's going to submit the experiment. You see that I'm the contributor and I cannot submit the experiment. But that person won't be able to submit the experiment until they know that I've finished. And therefore, when I've finished adding my data, I need to lock the sections which I've added. Click on this lock button, and there's a timestamp given, and this section is now locked and cannot be edited. As a contributor, I can add more than one section, so I can always add another section if I need to. I could add a text section here, for example. See, my NMR looks correct. And again, I'd need to lock that section. So then this contributor has added sections to the experiment. They cannot do anything in the authors sections. Of course, if they want to, they can take an authors section, they can copy it and paste another version of that section which they can edit. And of course, again, they would need to lock that when they've finished. So that's how you can contribute to an experiment. Now shall we look at the co-editing. So I'll just close this experiment and go back in as the first user. So now I'm doing another experiment here. This time I'm doing some formulation, and one of my colleagues is going to actually help me do this formulation, and they need to be able to enter data in my sections. So this time I want them to be a co-editor. So again, I click on the Share button. Again, I choose to share this experiment. Again, I click on Find Users, find the other user, double click, and I've added them. This time I'm going to choose for them to be a co-editor. click on OK. So now I'll close this experiment again and log out and log back in as the co-editor. So again, that experiment will now appear in their current experiments. Again, they open it in the usual way. And exactly the same as with the contributor, the toolbox is grayed out. They need to click on the Start Edit link here to be able to edit the experiment. Click on Start Edit, and now I can edit all of the sections in this experiment. I can open this Excel file, I can change the formulation, I can add data, select the cells as normal, save the selection, close Excel. And now you see it's recorded that this section was last edited by me as the co-editor, not as the author. And again, I can come into this text section and I can add some new data or change this data. So it's a different temperature. And I can also, again, it's marked that I've edited this section, and I can also add sections if I need to. So again, I've saved one here already, an image of this ketchup formulation. So, and again, that section has been marked as added by this other user. Okay, if I go back in and log in as the author of the experiment, open up the experiment again. So now I'm back in as the author. I can see which sections my colleague has co-edited, and if I want to, I can go in here as well and I can make changes. And then it'll be marked that I was the last person to work on this section. And as the author, I'm the person who's going to eventually submit the experiment with the padlock. So that's how you can share experiments in iLabber. As a contributor, where you can add sections, or as a co-editor, where you can both work together in the same sections.